Hey everyone, it's your know-it-all guy here. Welcome back to World War History, where we simplify history, so anyone can understand it. Because history doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to make sense. Last time, at the Marne River, both France and Germany were completely exhausted. The French couldn't keep chasing. The Germans couldn't keep attacking. There was no final victory, and there was no decisive defeat. There was only one simple result: the war stopped moving. And when a war can't move forward, it starts sinking deeper and deeper. This was no longer a quick war. This was a 4-year nightmare of mud, where millions of soldiers would die, in about 5 feet of mud. And somehow, things just kept getting worse. This is where trench warfare begins, and this is the moment. World War I went from a quick plan to a long, brutal nightmare. Trench warfare is born. Both sides began to dig trenches, take cover underground, and shoot at each other from a distance. This type of fighting is now known as trench warfare. Neither side had the strength to finish the other off. The overall situation was a stalemate. The trench systems gradually expanded to about 480 miles, stretching from the North Sea all the way to the Swiss border. Every single day, dozens of gunfights broke out. Shells exploded non-stop, and if you made one small mistake, even lifting your head above the ground for a few seconds, you'd get shot instantly. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers lost their lives just to fight over a few kilometers of land. Life in the trenches was mud everywhere, no proper drainage. Soldiers' feet became pale and damaged from being soaked in water for too long. This damp environment was also a paradise for rats, bacteria, and all kinds of diseases. Soldiers were forced to live next to dead bodies, breathe in the stench, and endure illness every single day. And that life lasted for 4 years. The quick war, quick win plan falls apart. In short, Germany originally planned to crush France in 40 days. But instead, 4 years later, nobody had won. Germany's quick win strategy officially collapsed. Looking at the big picture now, Germany was stuck in a very uncomfortable position. France to the west, Russia to the east, and their junior partner, Austria-Hungary, just couldn't carry the load. If this situation dragged on, Germany would only fall further behind. So Germany decided to change tactics. They reduced troops on the Western Front and shifted forces to the east, with one very clear goal: deliver a decisive blow to Russia and knock Russia out of the war. And to be fair, Germany's military strength at this point was genuinely impressive. Meanwhile, Russia was huge, heavily populated, but when it came to military organization, pretty clumsy. Russia's military system was conservative, outdated. Most soldiers came from farming backgrounds. Many of them were illiterate, never properly trained, and in some cases, didn't even know how to load ammunition into a rifle. The officer corps, meanwhile, was largely made up of privileged elites, with a serious lack of real battlefield experience. The result: Russia kept taking hit after hit. German forces won battle after battle, capturing a vast amount of territory from Russia, but there was one problem. Despite losing again and again, the Tsar was extremely stubborn and firmly insisted, keep fighting. Meanwhile, by this point, German troops were also completely exhausted, no longer strong enough to push deeper into Russian territory. And so, Germany's plan to knock Russia out of the war failed as well. Japan sees an opportunity, just as Germany was busy stabbing everyone in Europe. An empire in Asia looked at the situation and thought, well, not jumping in now would be a waste. That empire was Japan. Japan sent Germany an ultimatum, demanding that Germany hand over the Jiaozhou Bay concession in China, and gave Germany exactly 8 days to respond. Germany looked at the letter, looked at the clock, and didn't reply. So Japan said, okay, war. Japan declared war on Germany, and quickly seized Jiaozhou, and casually grabbed several German colonial islands, in the Pacific as well. Italy, the ally that switched sides. Oh, and there was one more of Germany's friends, Italy, on paper. Italy was part of the Central Powers, but in reality it was staying neutral, not very interested in fighting. The Allies noticed this and immediately tried to lure Italy over, "Come join us, win the war, and we'll give you some land from Austria-Hungary." Italy looked at Germany, looked at Austria-Hungary, then looked at the war map and thought, yeah, there's a pretty good chance Germany's gonna lose. And so, Italy switched sides. Austria-Hungary heard the news and completely lost it, called Italy a traitor, and decided to declare war on Italy, to teach Italy a lesson. Germany is carrying the team and exhausted. By this point, Germany found itself in a situation where it was carrying the entire team on its back while also getting betrayed by allies. A truly terrible combo. The Ottomans, a new ally appears. But right then, Germany spotted a small glimmer of hope. The Ottoman Empire was a neighbor of Russia and had a long history of bad blood with Russia. Germany looked at them and said, "Okay, bro, wanna team up?" And just like that, Germany managed to bring the Ottomans into the Central Powers. The Ottoman Empire officially joined the Central Powers and declared war on Russia. But there was one small problem. The Ottomans weren't exactly great at playing the war game. Plan 1. Cross the mountains in winter. The Ottomans' first plan was to cross the Caucasus Mountains and attack Russia. It sounded very heroic. But they forgot one extremely important detail. It was freezing cold out there. The result: large numbers of soldiers froze to death. And before they even met the Russian army, they were already out of the game. In short, they lost before the fight even started. Plan 2 attacked the Suez Canal. After that disaster, the Ottomans switched targets and decided to capture the Suez Canal, a critically important British possession. The problem was, British forces were simply too strong. And once again, the Ottomans took another beating. After that, the Ottomans launched several more campaigns, and the results were very consistent. Total failure. Armenia, a historical tragedy. At this point, within Ottoman territory lived a community known as the Armenians. Armenians lived inside the Ottoman Empire, but were relatively close to Russia, largely because they shared the same religion. The Ottoman government, angry and increasingly unstable, irrationally blamed the Armenians for its repeated military defeats. After that, the Ottoman Empire carried out a policy that is now known as the Armenian genocide. Nearly 1 million Armenians lost their lives. This event shocked global public opinion at the time and is considered one of the greatest tragedies of World War I. Back to Germany, another new idea. Back to Germany. After a long string of failed plans, Germany sat down, looked at the world map, and came up with another idea. In Central Asia at the time, there were India, Afghanistan, and both were under British control. Germany thought, if these two places start fighting each other, Britain is definitely going to panic. And if Britain panics, Germany gets a chance to hit Britain hard. Germany decided to send agents to Afghanistan to stir up propaganda, encouraging the population to rise up for independence from Britain and attack India at the same time. It sounded pretty sneaky, but in reality, Germany failed to convince Afghanistan. The instigation plan collapsed completely. And it didn't stop there. This move also managed to anger India, and India responded very clearly. Okay, now we're going to punch Germany in the face. So Germany's instigation plan officially failed. Not only did it fail to disrupt Britain, but it also earned Germany a brand new enemy, India. The laws of war, and Germany says, don't care. Before the world broke out, nations had agreed on a set of rules that were forbidden in war. Basically, 3 main rules: no chemical weapons, no killing civilians, and anyone who broke these rules would be strongly condemned. Germany read the rules, nodded, and said, okay, but nah. Germany then began to drop bombs directly on British cities, use poison gas and chemical weapons, and most importantly, deploy submarines to sink British merchant ships. German submarines extremely annoying. Germany's submarine strategy was extremely effective. Britain almost had no way to stop it. Massive numbers of cargo ships were sunk, causing Britain's economy to be strangled, severe food shortages, and the beginning of famine at home. At this point, Britain was facing the risk of defeat. In one unfortunate incident for Germany, a German submarine accidentally torpedoed an American ship, killing 128 American sailors. This incident caused the United States, previously a neutral country, to begin developing a very negative view of Germany. The southern front, Serbia, is done for. On the southern front, Austria-Hungary still hadn't finished dealing with Serbia. Serbia's neighbor, Bulgaria, meanwhile, was still bitter toward Serbia after losing several earlier wars. Germany and Austria-Hungary noticed this and quickly tempted Bulgaria. Join the Central Powers. You can have whatever you want. That sounded pretty good. So, Bulgaria joined the Central Powers and took the chance to get revenge on Serbia at the same time. Attacked from both sides by Austria-Hungary and Bulgaria, Serbia collapsed. 1917, the war starts to run out of steam. By 1917, the war had dragged on for 3 years and passed its peak. At this point, the biggest question was, who would be the first country to quit? And the answer was Russia. Despite its massive territory, Russia's economy was not as strong as Britain, France, or Germany. To keep the war going, the Russian government had mobilized up to 10 million people, imposed a wide range of new taxes, and this became the spark for a domestic disaster. Pulling so many people into the army left Russian agriculture dangerously short on labor. After 3 years of non-stop fighting, Russia's economy fell into the red zone. The population was pushed into a state of hunger, lack of clothing, and total despair. As a result, millions of Russians starved to death. Meanwhile, Russia's military leadership was largely made up of aristocrats and privileged elites, with a severe lack of real battlefield experience. The result: Russia lost to Germany on most fronts. The army grew demoralized. The population became furious. Discontent spread from the battlefield gives the home front, gives all of society. Internal tensions in Russia grew tighter and tighter. Like a stretched wire about to snap, Lenin enters the scene. By May 1917, a man named Lenin stepped forward and began giving speeches calling for strikes, mass protests, and an end to the war. This movement spread extremely fast across Russia, and by October 1917, a mass revolution officially broke out. Today, we know this event as the Russian October Revolution. The October Revolution didn't just matter to Russia alone. It also influenced many other nations around the world, including Vietnam. However, Mr. Know-It-All will dive deeper into that part in another video. The Tsar falls, Russia leaves the game. With the victory of the October Revolution, the Tsar was overthrown. Lenin announced the establishment of the Soviet state. The new government agreed to give up part of its territory to Germany in exchange for ending the war. The first decrees of the Soviet state were to withdraw from World War I, seize land from landlords and redistribute it to peasants, stabilize the economy, and save the population from misery. And so, Russia became the first country to withdraw from World War I. This was extremely good news for Germany. Russia was out of the game, which meant Germany could now shift all of its forces to the Western Front, preparing for an all-out attack on Britain and France. But Germany spots a new problem: the United States. However, Germany soon realized something worrying: the United States. The US was officially a neutral country, but in reality, throughout the entire war, the US was the biggest winner. America made huge amounts of money by manufacturing weapons and selling them to the countries at war. By 1917, while most nations were economically exhausted and militarily weakened, the United States had clearly grown much richer. In other words, the whole world was worn out, and the US was counting cash. At this point, the United States had risen to the #1 position in the world, both economically and militarily. Seeing this, Germany began to think, yeah, letting this guy grow any stronger is not a good idea. And so Germany decided to find ways to mess with the United States. Mexico, the perfect piece. America's neighbor was Mexico. In the past, the United States had fought Mexico and taken away 3 territories: Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. In other words, there was old bad blood between them. Germany looked at this relationship and thought, okay, bro, let's use the old trick again, the Zimmerman telegram. Germany drafted a telegram and sent it to Mexico. The message was very straightforward, urging Mexico to attack the United States, take back the lost territories, and Germany promised to support Mexico in return. This event is now known as the Zimmerman telegram. If you're curious, you can look it up yourself. But for now, there's just one thing you need to know. This plan was extremely risky. Unfortunately for Germany, the telegram never made it to Mexico. British intelligence intercepted it first. Britain read it, didn't think twice, and immediately passed it on to the United States. And naturally, the US was not happy at all. They've never liked each other. Honestly, Germany had already left a bad impression on the United States long before this. From brutal acts of destruction across Europe to German submarines sinking American cargo ships, right from the start, the US never liked Germany. But beyond emotions, the US also had a very practical reason. Strategically speaking, the United States had loaned Britain, France, and many other allied countries huge amounts of money to fight the war. If the Allies lost, that money would be gone for good, and it didn't stop there. If Germany won the war, Germany would become the dominant power in Europe. And given Germany's aggressive nature, there was a very high chance it wouldn't stop there. Sooner or later, the Americas could be threatened as well. Looking at the bigger picture, the United States came to one conclusion: no, Germany cannot be allowed to win. In other words, the US was determined to make sure Germany lost. And the Zimmerman telegram turned out to be the perfect excuse. On April 6, 1917, the United States officially declared war on Germany. The US made it very clear Germany was about to get hit. Back in Europe, British and French manpower was nearly exhausted. They had been fighting for 4 straight years, and without some kind of game-changing factor, things could easily fall apart. After Russia announced its withdrawal from the war, Germany immediately shifted all of its forces to the Western Front, launching a series of extremely aggressive offensives aimed at crushing Britain and France. German troops pushed deep into enemy territory, just a little bit more, and Paris would fall into German hands. Germany began to believe, okay, this is it. King Wilhelm II was so confident that he even declared March 24th would be a national celebration to mark Germany's victory. But then, the US showed up. Just as things were starting to look really good for Germany, over 1 million American soldiers arrived in Europe and began directly supporting Britain and France. And this was the worst possible scenario for Germany. After 4 years of war, German troops were exhausted, short on manpower, short on food, and their morale was collapsing. Meanwhile, the American army was entering the war for the first time, fully equipped, massive in numbers and morale-wise, extremely fired up. In short, one side was like someone who had just finished running a 4-year marathon. The other side? Someone who had just finished warming up. The balance of the war turns. From this point on, the course of the war was no longer unpredictable. American forces, working alongside Britain and France, launched a series of non-stop counteroffensives. And the result was, Germany took hit after hit. All the territory Germany had painfully captured, over 4 years of war, was pushed back and lost in just a few months. In just 6 months alone, Germany's troop numbers dropped from 5.2 million to 4.1 million. Germany had mobilized almost every able-bodied man in the country, but still lacked the strength to keep fighting. By June 1918, Germany's forces were vastly outnumbered by Britain, France, and the United States. And at this point, there was no real ability left to resist. The Central Powers collapsed. By the end of September 1918, the Central Powers officially surrendered to the Allies. Germany was defeated. The irony was many Germans could hardly believe how quickly Germany had lost, because just a few months earlier, they still thought victory was within reach. The German Empire falls apart. Defeat threw Germany into chaos. protests, riots, and several small-scale civil conflicts. Public anger exploded. King Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate, flee to the Netherlands to seek asylum. The German Empire officially collapsed. Germany's territory was reduced, and the country was renamed the Weimar Republic. Around the same time, the Austro-Hungarian Empire disintegrated, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and Europe was redrawn into a patchwork of smaller nations. The detailed story behind the collapse of these empires, Mr. Know-It-All will cover in another video. For now, let's return to the final chapter of the war. The Treaty of Versailles, peace, but make it painful. After the war ended, Germany was forced by the victors to sign a treaty known as the Treaty of Versailles. And the terms were very simple. Germany had to give up part of its territory, dismantle its military, and pay war reparations, amounting to a massive sum of money. In short, this didn't really feel like a peace treaty. It felt more like a bill that had to be paid. The cost of World War I after this war. 1.5 billion people were drawn into the conflict. 10 million were killed. 20 million were permanently disabled. Although Britain and France were labeled the winners, in reality, the destruction they suffered was even worse than Germany's. Cities lay in ruins. Economies collapsed. Societies were completely drained. The real winner. Meanwhile, there was one country that was barely touched by bombs, suffered no destruction on its own territory, yet made money throughout the entire war. That country was the United States, thanks to selling weapons and lending money to the countries at war. The U.S. economy doubled after the war. Not only that, most European countries ended up deeply in debt to the United States. In other words, Europe was left in ruins while the U.S. clearly got richer. A side perspective, but a very important one. There's one thing many people overlook. In World War I, it wasn't just European countries fighting each other. They also dragged their colonies, countries that had nothing to do with the conflict, into the war. Take Vietnam, for example, which at the time was a colony of France. Tens of thousands of young Vietnamese men were sent to Europe, forced to labor or fight on the battlefield, and many of them never returned home. Back home, the population was also heavily exploited, burdened with countless taxes, and forced to bear the consequences of a war that was never theirs to begin with. A peace that didn't last. In reality, the Treaty of Versailles never brought lasting peace. Its unfair terms fueled resentment in the defeated nations, created tension between winners and losers. It didn't resolve conflicts. It only buried them temporarily. 20 years later, from the very cracks left by the Treaty of Versailles, another figure emerged. He exploited economic crisis, public resentment, and the bitter memories of war to build a new empire and drag the entire world into a war far more devastating than before. That war we now know as World War II. Mr. Know-It-All concludes, World War I was called the war to end all wars, but in reality, it was only the beginning.